This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of July 24th, 2022. What's on my mind this week? The vital importance of community. Let's talk about community for a second, and not just in the context of marketing, though marketing also. What is community, and why do we care? The standard definition and etymology is a group of people associated together by a fact of residence in the same locality. From the Latin communis, which, by the way, is the root for common, community, and communism. More broadly, though, it's a group of people associated together by something in common. These days, community really is all about that second aspect. Locality still matters, right? Your local community is important. But that second aspect about the association together by something in common is really important. When you look at communities, particularly online, we see common interests that bring people together and keep them together. Go into a directory like Discord or Reddit, and you'll find more communities than you could ever possibly join on virtually any topic. So why should we care about community? Community is an insurance policy. Community is an insurance policy as both a concept and as something we should actively be participating in. What kind of insurance policy? Like any group of people working together, a strong community comes to the aid of its individual members when one of them needs help. For example, the community that belongs to one of the YouTube channels I watch, Beau of the Fifth Column, was able to muster large quantities of PPE, personal protective equipment, at the start of the pandemic back in 2020 for local hospitals in his area that couldn't get a hold of any. Similar things happened all over. Here locally, I had a small amount of excess stock of N95 masks at the time in the early 2020, and a friend's sister, who was an ICU nurse, desperately needed some for their COVID ward. My friend called me up and said, "Hey, do you have anything that would help?" I said, "Yeah, I got a pile of like 20 N95s that I wasn't using. I had some for myself and my family, but I had an extra amount, and we were able to donate them and help keep some of the healthcare professionals, at least locally, safer than they would have been otherwise." That's the power of community. It's an insurance policy. When the defecation hits the ventilation, having a network of people that you can rely on and that they can rely on you is vital. Even in a commercial sense, a community can help its individual members. And we have a Slack group, our Slack community, Analytics for Marketers. Go over to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Have folks helping each other out every day, answering each other's questions, sharing ideas, giving feedback. For something like bringing attention to a particular initiative, communities can act faster and more effectively than large organizations, especially bureaucratic ones, and can bypass traditional gatekeepers. When everybody's in the same Slack channel, if you need to DM somebody, direct message somebody in a certain organization or client or what have you, you don't have to necessarily go through the rigmarole of sending them an email and booking a go-to-meeting. You can just message them. It is an incredibly fast way to stay in touch with people who matter to you. And the benefits of communities don't stop there. Beyond organizationally, communities can be a huge benefit to individual people like you and me. As a species, we evolved to depend on our community, on our locally pooled resources, right? Since the earliest days of hiding together in caves, we have been social animals to survive. One of the worst punishments that you could incur early on in our civilization was being exiled from your community, because it means you're literally going to die. You're not going to have the support of the others to get through a hard winter or to find enough food and so on and so forth. So much so that we derive pleasure. We've adapted and evolved to derive pleasure from being around others, even those of us who are more misanthropic than others, right? Especially when we are mutually supported, when we find that common ground. Those folks who tended to fare worse during the lockdowns in 2020 from a mental health perspective were those who didn't have access to communities of some kind that they could participate in digitally. Now, it all sounds great, right? Why isn't this wildly successful everywhere? Well, The analogy of a community to an insurance policy is especially apt because it explains why, particularly for companies, why companies rarely succeed in building the communities to the extent that they might wish, especially from a marketing standpoint. For insurance to work, you have to have a lot of people investing in it over a long period of time with relatively few withdrawals to make the business of insurance financially viable. The exact same thing is true of community. Individuals, a whole bunch of them, have to invest a lot into it to gain benefit from it. Now, you don't have to have a lot of people, but you do have to have a lot of investment, right? You can have a very strong, small community as long as everyone is really heavily invested. I'm in a couple of Discord servers where there's 3 people, right? 5 people, 8 people. Very strong communities because people invest a lot in it, but they don't have to be huge. If you don't invest, though, it doesn't work, right? You can't just slap together a group full of people and expect magic instantly. More importantly, our community from the beginning needs to have a clear sense of common ground, some kind of focal point that binds them together. Sometimes it's a person, right? Like the legions of fans surrounding a public personality like Taylor Swift. Sometimes it's a franchise, like people who are fans of Star Trek. Sometimes it's a concept like voting rights, but in every case, the common ground is the root of community in both the literal and figurative senses. Does the community that you want to build have a clear common ground? Here's another catch that companies, again, especially companies, often screw up. Common ground and common interest is almost always rooted in emotion. Sustainable long-term community success is rooted in emotion. People have to feel something to believe in its importance, right? To make time for it, to give time. They have to have a literal passion for whatever the common ground is, right? It's why you see huge followings for entertainers, right? The Taylor Swifts of the world, because their audiences are so heavily emotionally invested in them that building a community is pretty straightforward. If you're trying to figure out why some communities work and others don't, examine the emotions around them. What kinds of emotions are common to successful communities? Why are those emotions in place? If you want to know your prospects for success in building a community, personally or professionally, answer a few straightforward questions. How emotionally invested are you in your audience? Do you know? Have you talked to them? Do they proactively talk to you? If so, what do they say and how do they say it to you? Think about your company's interactions or your interactions with people and the emotions that are involved. How do people feel when you're talking to them? How do people feel when they're talking about you? If they don't feel anything, there's, general mild content. It's going to be really hard to build a community around that. It's very hard to build a passionate community around, the we were not displeased, right? It's real hard to build a community around that level of emotion, as opposed to someone who's a raging fan. Here's a second test to judge your community readiness. Tally up the number of actual, real human audience members you talk to every week, whether by email, social media, private community, in person, etc. If you can count the answer on one hand of just ordinary people that you're talking to, you need to invest more in speaking with the people already in your sphere, in your existing communities, the people who follow you on social media, subscribers to your newsletter, etc. Once you get past fingers and you can start counting on toes, then you're starting to talk to enough people to accurately assess your prospects for successful community building. If you have an executive or a stakeholder who reads about community and says, we need a community, ask them, how many people, real people, do you talk to each week? And if the answer, again, isn't, you can only be counted on hands and not toes, that executive probably isn't talking to enough people to understand the prospects for success or the lack thereof with community. It's very, very difficult to build community in a top-down sense. You need top-down sponsorship. You need top-down investment. But organic growth of a community, that purpose, that passion, that emotion, that's bottom up, right? You can't tell people how to feel. You can only create conditions for them to feel something and then work with you on that. So, in short, if community building and community and all this social media influence and all that stuff bundled together, if that's something that's of interest to you and to your company, to yourself personally or professionally, ask those two questions, right? Take those two tests. What is the emotion that people feel most towards you right now? And how many real people do you talk to every week? And if your answers are not clear, if your answers are not enthusiastic, you've got more homework to do before you're ready to build a community. Other things in the news this week. Got a whole bunch of new content up. Two that are important. One was a question somebody asked on whether a recession is imminent or not, and I took a look at the National Bureau of Economic Research, the data they use for judging recessions to figure out whether or not a recession is imminent. I'll take a look at that one. And the other was just a straight blog post, not a video, this week for marketers to stop funding disinformation and walk through how you determine what disinformation is based on, things like media bias charts, and then how to configure ad software to not spend ad dollars on those publications that are handing out patently wrong information, right? Good information, correct information, good data, truthful data is at a premium in the world right now and will be for ever, right? If we want to make good decisions in increasingly uncertain circumstances. And if we are contributing to the problem by handing ad dollars to people who are handing out bad data, which is always a problem, then we're contributing to the problem. So take a look at those two articles and, of course, a bunch of other ones, a bunch of other things, including some stuff on Bing Webmaster Tools. New jobs this week. Got some fun stuff. TikTok is hiring for a technical product specialist in measurement, which could be a very interesting position. Data engineer at Nuance Communications, a wellness data reporter at the Washington Post, an R statistician at the United Nations, analytics consultant at DPT, data analyst at Brinkley, and Adobe analytics specialist at Mobile Live. So lots of good activity there in terms of people they're hiring for things. In the ads, as always, got some courses, the Google Search Console course and the Google Analytics 4 courses. You can see links in the newsletter. Please get your Google Analytics 4 installed. You're now almost a month into not having year-over-year data when the cutover happens next year. In other news, the news that you folks have been sharing, we have marketing trends shaping influencers, social media, and copyright. Always fun. AI-driven SEO becoming essential for modern marketing, which is true. Social impact of AI. Do you need a PhD to be a data scientist? Bias and fairness in natural language processing. AI model boosting, chemical reaction mapping, some pretty cool stuff there. In a little more than a week time on the events front, I'll be headed to MAICON, the Marketing AI Conference. Go to maicon.ai. Use discount code PEN150 for $150 off any conference ticket. I'm driving out the day before, and all I can say is this. My session will be hopefully microbiologically the safest session at the conference. I've got a couple of 20-inch box fans and some MERV 13 filters, air filters to screen out particles and stuff. So while events as a whole may be challenging now with two, not just one, but two simultaneous pandemics. Yeah, that happened this morning. All I can say is, do your best to keep yourself safe. Take precautions. If you can drive to a conference and bring your own protective gear for yourself and the audience, do so. Again, the data doesn't lie. There's some interesting things going on out there. Anyway, that's the news for this week. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for spending some time with me. And I hope that you have a good week, a safe week between heat waves and wildfires and wars and pandemics and stuff. It's uncertain times. So the best we can do is look out for each other and keep ourselves safe. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next week. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.